Chapter 1. The Curious Laboratory. Brighton, a city known for its sea, shops, and stories, had many secrets. One of its best-kept secrets was a small laboratory hidden down an old alley. The alley was lined with brick walls, some covered in moss, giving it an ancient feel. In this hidden spot, Dr. Leonard Harris had his world. It was not like any other room. There were machines of all sizes, wires everywhere, and lights that flashed and beeped. Some of these machines looked old, like they had a lot of stories to tell. Others were shiny and new, waiting to be used in an experiment. In one corner of the lab, there was a big wooden desk. On this desk, you could find many papers. These were full of drawings, numbers, and notes. It was clear that Dr. Leonard was a very busy man. He often said that these papers were the keys to new worlds. Today, Dr. Leonard was very excited. His white hair was a bit messy, and his glasses almost fell off as he moved quickly around the room. He was wearing a long white coat, which made him look very important. But his eyes were the most excited part of him. They shone brightly as he spoke to his best friend, Baxter. Baxter was a big golden retriever with a shiny coat and bright eyes. He looked at Dr. Leonard with a curious tilt of his head. The dog had been with Dr. Leonard since he was a small puppy. Baxter had seen many experiments and had heard many stories. He was the perfect listener. Every time Dr. Leonard spoke about his ideas, Baxter would wag his tail, as if he understood everything. "Today is the day, Baxter," Dr. Leonard said, rubbing his hands together. "We're going to try something very special." Baxter barked happily, wagging his tail. He didn't know what was going to happen, but with his best friend by his side, he was ready for any adventure. Chapter 2. An Unexpected Swap. The morning sun shone brightly into the laboratory, casting long shadows across the floor. Dr. Leonard had set up a new machine in the center of the room. This machine was big and round, with blue lights that glowed softly. There was a platform at the base and above it, a ring that looked a bit like a giant hula hoop. Dr. Leonard looked at his notes and then at the machine. "This, Baxter, will change everything," he said with a big smile. "I want to move this apple from one side of the room to the other without touching it." Baxter looked at the apple, then at Dr. Leonard, and then back at the apple. He loved apples. Every time Dr. Leonard ate one, he always gave a piece to Baxter. With everything ready, Dr. Leonard placed the apple on the platform. He then walked over to a big red button near the wall. "Watch closely, Baxter," he said, his finger hovering over the button. But just as he was about to press the button, Baxter smelled something. It was the smell of his favorite treat, which Dr. Leonard always kept in his pocket. Without thinking, Baxter jumped onto the platform, hoping to get a treat. "Dr. Leonard shouted, "No, Baxter," but it was too late. He had already pressed the button. There was a bright flash, a loud noise, and then silence. When the light faded, there was a big surprise. Baxter, now in Dr. Leonard's body, looked around in shock. He tried to bark but heard a human voice instead. At the same time, Dr. Leonard, in Baxter's furry body, tried to shout but could only manage a loud bark. The two looked at each other, their eyes wide in surprise. Baxter, with Dr. Leonard's voice, mumbled, "What happened?" while Dr. Leonard, with Baxter's bark, could only express his shock and confusion. The machine had done something unexpected. Instead of moving the apple, it had swapped the bodies of Dia, Leonard and Baxter. The adventure had just begun. Chapter 3. Lucy's Discovery. The next morning, the sun once again filled the laboratory with its warm light. Birds were singing outside, but inside the lab, things were not so cheerful. Dia, Leonard, in Baxter's body, tried to pick up his glasses from the table, but his new paws made it very hard. He barked in frustration. Baxter, now in Dia, Leonard's body, was also having a tough time. He kept trying to scratch his ear with his foot, but it just wasn't working. Suddenly, the door opened, and a young woman walked in. She had short brown hair, big blue eyes, and was wearing a colorful scarf around her neck. This was Lucy, Dia, Leonard's research assistant. She had been working with him for 2 years and loved every moment of it. Today, she had come in early to help with another experiment. "Good morning, Dia, Harris," she greeted cheerfully. But then she stopped and looked around, confused. "Why is Baxter on 2 legs and why are you on the floor, Dia, Harris?" Baxter, in Dia, Leonard's body, tried to bark a greeting but only managed to say a mumbled hello in a deep voice. He then tried to wag his tail but remembered he didn't have one now. Dia, Leonard, in Baxter's body, tried his best to wave, but his paw just thumped the ground. Lucy's eyes went wide. She quickly put 2 and 2 together. "Oh my, the experiment. You've swapped bodies." She looked at the machine in the middle of the room and then at her notes on the table. For the rest of the morning, Lucy tried to understand what had gone wrong. She looked at all the dials, read through the notes, and even tried to turn the machine on and off. But nothing seemed to work. Dia, Leonard, even in Baxter's body, tried to help. He would point with his nose to different parts of the machine, bark once for yes and twice for no, and even tried to write down his thoughts, although holding a pen was very tricky. Baxter, on the other hand, was finding it all a bit too much. He kept getting distracted by his reflection in the shiny equipment and by the smells coming from the open window. At one point, he even tried to chase his own shadow. As the day went on, Lucy started to get worried. "We need to fix this," she said, looking at the 2 of them. "We need to find a way to swap you back." But how? The answer was not in the lab. They needed to look outside, to the bigger world of Brighton, and to the mysteries of time and space. The adventure was far from over. Chapter 4. The Timekeeper's Request. The afternoon sun was beginning to set, painting Brighton in shades of orange and pink. Lucy decided to take Dia, Leonard and Baxter to a close friend of hers, someone she believed could help them. This person was known by many as the Timekeeper, but to Lucy, he was just old Mr. Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins lived in a tall, narrow house near the sea. The house looked old with its brown bricks and wooden windows, but it was always full of life. People said Mr. Jenkins had lived there for many, many years and knew a lot about strange and mysterious things. When they reached the house, Lucy knocked on the big wooden door. It opened slowly, and there stood Mr. Jenkins. He was a thin man with grey hair and glasses that made his eyes look very big. He always wore the same brown coat and hat, no matter the weather. "Lucy," he exclaimed in surprise. "What brings you here?" Lucy quickly explained the strange events of the day. Mr. Jenkins listened carefully, nodding his head from time to time. When she finished, he looked at Dia. Leonard and Baxter, who were both looking very lost and confused. "I think I can help," said Mr. Jenkins slowly. "But it won't be easy." Lucy looked hopeful. "Please, Mr. Jenkins, we'll do anything." Mr. Jenkins looked deep into Lucy's eyes. "To fix this, you will need the quantum key. It's a special object that can help correct the mistake." Lucy frowned. "But where can we find this quantum key?" Mr. Jenkins pointed to an old map on his wall. "The key is hidden in Brighton. You will need to follow the clues and find it before the next full moon. Time is of the essence, dear." Leonard barked once, and Baxter nodded his head, trying to look serious. With the map in hand and a new goal in mind, the three of them left Mr. Jenkins' house. They were ready to face the challenges ahead and find the quantum key. Their journey through the streets and secrets of Brighton had just begun. Chapter 5: The Quest Through Brighton. Brighton, with its busy streets, lovely shops, and the ever-present sound of the sea, was a city full of life. Today, it was also the backdrop for an important quest. Lucy, with the map from Mr. Jenkins, led Dr. Leonard in Baxter's body and Baxter in Dr. Leonard's body on their search for the quantum key. The first clue on the map pointed to the famous Brighton Pier. The pier, with its bright lights and fun games, was always full of people. As they walked, Baxter, in Dr. Leonard's body, was amazed by the sounds of the arcade games and the smell of candy floss. He even tried to catch a flying seagull, but Lucy gently pulled him back. After searching high and low, Dr. Leonard spotted a small, shiny object under one of the benches. It was a coin with a strange symbol on it. This was the next clue. Following the map, they made their way to the Royal Pavilion, a beautiful palace in the heart of the city. The gardens around the building were green and full of flowers. Baxter, now with human senses, marveled at the colors and intricate designs of the palace. Here, they found a small box hidden behind a stone statue. Inside the box was a riddle. Under the moon, by the water's side, where sounds of laughter and music collide. Lucy thought hard. The beach. At night, people play music and dance by the sea. Rushing to Brighton Beach, they saw a small group of people around a bonfire, playing guitars and singing. Among them was a man with a blue hat. Lucy remembered Mr. Jenkins mentioning him as a friend. Approaching him and showing the coin and riddle, he smiled and handed them a key with the same symbol as the coin. But it wasn't the quantum key. Instead, it was the key to the old clock tower in the town square. Lucy, Dr. Leonard, and Baxter climbed the tower's stairs, their hopes rising with every step. At the top, under the giant clock face, was a pedestal. On it sat a shimmering, intricate key. The quantum key. But their joy was short-lived. The sound of ticking echoed around them. The full moon was rising, and they had little time left. With the quantum key safely in Lucy's pocket, they hurried back, hoping they weren't too late to set things right. Chapter 6: A Race Against Time. As they made their way back to Mr. Jenkins' house, the streets of Brighton seemed to come alive in the moonlight. The buildings cast long, dancing shadows, and the wind carried the distant sound of the sea, reminding them of the urgency of their mission. Reaching the house, Lucy quickly knocked on the door. Mr. Jenkins, looking worried, opened it and assured them inside. "You've got the quantum key," he exclaimed, seeing the shimmering object in Lucy's hand. "Yes, but we don't have much time," Lucy replied. looking at the rising moon through the window. Mr. Jenkins nodded and led them to a small room at the back of his house. The room was filled with old books, strange-looking tools, and a big table in the middle. On the table was a machine, similar to the one in Dr. Leonard's lab, but much older. "This is where the quantum key needs to go," Mr. Jenkins said, pointing to a slot on the machine. Lucy carefully placed the key in the slot. The machine started to hum softly, and the room was filled with a gentle blue light. "Both of you, stand on that platform," instructed Mr. Jenkins, pointing towards a marked area on the floor. Dr. Leonard and Baxter hesitated for a moment, looking at each other. Baxter, in Dr. Leonard's body, gave a small nod, and the two of them stepped onto the platform. Lucy held her breath, hoping that everything would work out. Mr. Jenkins pressed a series of buttons, and the machine's hum grew louder. There was a flash of light, and then silence. When the light faded, Lucy saw Dr. Leonard, back in his own body, looking dazed but relieved. Beside him was Baxter, wagging his tail happily, clearly glad to be back in his familiar furry form. Lucy sighed in relief, tears of joy filling her eyes. "We did it," she exclaimed, rushing to hug both of them. Dr. Leonard smiled, adjusting his glasses. "Thank you, Lucy. And thank you, Mr. Jenkins." Mr. Jenkins nodded, looking satisfied. "Remember, every action has a reaction. Be careful in your experiments." The adventure had come to an end, but the memories of the quest through Brighton, the discovery of the quantum key, and the importance of teamwork would stay with them forever. Thank you for watching. You could download the vocabulary PDF below. To stay up to date on our future videos, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, and let us know what you think in the comments below.